right, good morning, class. My name is Will Colvin, and I did my presentation on Clostridium difficile. For this presentation, I spent about 9 hours working and researching on it. What is Clostridium difficile? It's a bacterium that's present in soil, air, water, and on surfaces, and is present in the bodies of between about 1 to 3% of the U.S. population and can survive on surfaces for weeks or potentially months. It's anaerobic bacteria. It's gram-positive and spore-forming. Its shape is bacillus, and it uses chemotaxis to swim, swimming counterclockwise with its flagella. As far as a few traits, produces two toxins, A and B, that cause inflammation in the colon. It's highly resistant to harsh environments and most disinfectants, and it's common in healthcare settings and often directly associated with antibiotic use. Taxonomy, class, and genus. Its official name is Clostridioides difficile. Its class is Clostridia, and its genus is Clostridioides. Signs and symptoms: diarrhea is most common, fever, blood and stool, abdominal pain, cramping, tenderness, and distension, and excessive dehydration due to the diarrhea often. Loss of appetite as well, and weight loss. In more severe cases, you can get pseudomembranous colitis and colon perforations, which can cause complications like sepsis, internal bleeding, and may end up requiring surgical intervention. As far as entry and exit routes and reservoirs and spread, entry route is ingestion via the fecal oral route. Spores are generally introduced to the body via this route through the ingestion of the spores, like I mentioned. So via contaminated food, water, or just contact with the contaminated surface and then the touching of the mouth or food that's entering the mouth. Sole exit route for C. diff is through bowel movements, as it exists in the feces of infected organisms. As far as reservoirs, most commonly include humans that have touched C. diff spores who then act as vectors, those who are infected by C. diff, or healthcare environments. And there's actually some studies that show that some farm animals in agricultural settings may even carry C. diff. Virulence factors that contribute to its infectiousness. There are two toxins, like I mentioned before, toxins A and toxins B. Toxins A is an enterotoxin that specifically targets the cell lining and of the intestines, and toxin B, which directly damages bodily cells pretty indiscriminately, who together disrupt the intestinal lining and the fluid balance. And in some more hypervirulent strains in certain places of C. diff, there's actually a third toxin called binary toxin, which contributes further to intestinal cell death, which increases its severity even more. And other factors include its highly resistant spores that can resist harsh environments, as well as their resistance to antibiotics that are effective against a lot of other different bacteria as well. Additionally, it produces the surface proteins that help it adhere to the intestinal wall, which allow it to colonize more effectively, and also create a biofilm that works with it to avoid immune detection and can cause recurring infections. All right, testing, treatment, and prevention. Testing, stool samples, and lab analysis, where they run tests like an enzyme immunoassay that tests for toxin A and B. There's a PCR test that tests for C. diff, the genetic material, or what's called a glutamate dehydrogenase test that tests for a specific enzyme produced by C. diff. And usually these tests are just run in conjunction with one another to determine if it's there or not inside a culture. And there's also a stool culture that can be done, but they're much more time and labor intensive. In more severe cases, however, they will do sometimes endoscopies or colonoscopies to kind of assess the damage and severity due to the C. diff. CT scans can also show signs of C. diff by visualizing like the thickening of the colon or like colon perforations, that kind of thing. As far as treatment goes, they'll use some powerful antibiotics that are proven to kill C. diff, like already known to kill it, like Vanco, fidaxomicin, and metronidazole. And as we discussed in class, they also will administer a fecal microbiota transplantation, where the stool from a person with a healthy gut microbiome synthesized into like a liquid or capsule form and is administered rectally or orally, which helps like kind of recolonize the gut and its microbiome with a healthy gut flora. And then you also have supportive care like rehydration, electrolytes that can be administered to kind of counteract the diarrhea-related fluid loss. And then sometimes that's also used in conjunction with like probiotics, which are meant to just kind of help in the recovery. As far as prevention, proper hand hygiene, proper decontamination with proper disinfectants like bleach in this case, and then isolation precautions. So what's called a contact precaution, where you're not only wearing gloves in the room of a patient with this kind of issue, but you're also wearing a gown as well. And also mitigating this on the front end, just trying to limit unnecessary antibiotic usage for people in general. And then as a healthcare system, trying to minimize the use of it only when absolutely necessary, as well as education and training on control measures and transmission risk. Similarities to other diseases, similar to things like salmonella and E. coli, because they all contain similar symptoms of diarrhea, abdominal cramping, and fever. Transmission-wise, it's kind of similar to norovirus and rotavirus, which also spread through the fecal-oral route with contaminated surfaces, food, and water. And then it also resembles other opportunistic pathogens like Candida albicans, which thrive in microbiomes that have been made vulnerable to different attacks due to the antibiotic usage. Disease location, season, endemic or pandemic potential. It's found everywhere. It's more common in temperate regions like North America and Europe. And as far as routine locations, healthcare settings, soil, water, contaminated food, animal feces, that kind of thing. Its seasonality kind of differs across the world, but in the U.S. it seems highest in March, with the Northeast region having the highest number of cases. As far as endemic versus pandemic, while pandemic's not really that likely, it is endemic to many different countries, and it does have that kind of potential because regardless of the mitigation factors in place and the knowledge about it, it still circulates and is prevalent throughout healthcare systems and healthcare settings in general, regardless of all that. So social, economic, and cultural effects. Studies done by the CDC showed that it's disproportionately affecting people based off factors like socioeconomic status, housing, transportation, disabilities, and language barriers. And those studies also show that they're much more likely to have severe complications and potential death when afflicted with C. diff. Cultural effects. While reporting and testing is important, in developing countries, it's not happening at the same rate that it happens in a lot of first world countries, and a lot of studies show that risk of healthcare acquired infections like C. diff is much higher in developing countries due to lack of infection control resources, as well as lack of education surrounding things like C. diff. So that's it. That's my presentation on C. diff. Ultimately, the best anyone can do is try to educate themselves on the people and the people in their lives about kind of proper infection control to mitigate contracting it, as well as the importance of your gut microbiome's health especially in regards to like when you've used recurrent antibiotic dosages, to try to get that back in gear so you're not left vulnerable. Thanks for listening, you guys. There's my references. Had a lot of them. All right, that's it. Thank you. Have a good one.